All right, so we're recording here. Well, it's 6 o'clock. See people streaming in here. We made it. Okay, well, let's get started. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome everybody to Local Food College. As we get started here, I'd like to point everybody, make sure everybody's aware of a couple of features that we'll be able to use. On the bottom left here, under participants, I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see my screen, but there's a little hand, and I've raised my hand, if anybody can see this. Feel free to go ahead and hit the little hand button and raise your hand, and then that is how, if you have questions, you can raise your hand during the presentation, and we will, if it's a good time, we'll stop and hear your questions. I can mute and unmute people, but right now everybody is muted, I believe, so we'll deal with that as we go on as well. Also, I should say that there is a chat box down here. I think you all should be able to chat. There's a little arrow that you can press to expand the chat box, and then you can type things in your chat box if you have a question pop up and you're muted. And at some point, we'll stop periodically, and we'll all have the chance to answer and ask questions, or ask questions anyhow. I should say that my name is Greg Schweizer. I'm working with the University Extension's Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. So I'm one of the hosts for many of the local food college events like this one. And since we've got all those formalities out of the way, I might as well go ahead and introduce our guest this week, Paul Huguenin here. Paul Huguenin works with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Minnesota Grown program. Minnesota Grown has been a vital tool for our local foods workers in Minnesota over the past dozen years or so. I don't know exactly how many, but their Minnesota Grown logo and programming has really been a vital tool to help raise the profile of local foods throughout Minnesota. Paul has more than 25 years of experience marketing local foods and currently supervises the marketing section at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Over 1,225 producers are licensed to use the Minnesota Grown logo, and the Minnesota Grown Directory features more than 1,000 places to buy directly from the producer, including farmers markets, orchards, wineries, garden centers, and more. MinnesotaGrown.com receives over 300,000 unique visitors annually. It's great stuff. And Paul here is a graduate from the University of Minnesota Department of Applied Economics, currently serves as past president of the CFANS Alumni Society Board of Directors and has served several terms as the alumni co-chairs of the CFANS Mentor program. We're very happy to have Paul here, and please, as we go along, ask questions again, either by raising your hand or typing directly into this chat thing, and we'll try to incorporate everybody. All right, Paul, I think that you are in charge, so if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here very much. So what I want to do tonight is, first of all, thank you for answering the poll question. That's really helpful. I've got a second question. Maybe, do I need to close the first question before I can do the second question?
Yep, that's correct, Paul.
Okay. So, looks like if you haven't answered the first poll question, if you would do that, and then I'll close that, and then we'll see the second one. And that first one was just whether or not you were a Minnesota Grown member. So this is good. We've got kind of a mixture of people who are and people who aren't. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and let you take, oh, I see. So it's going to give about 15 seconds, and then we'll go to the next one. Countdown 5, 4. It's really dramatic that way. All right, super. And there's another one just to kind of get an idea of what kind of background people have as well. So the second poll one is open as well. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the Minnesota Grown program, how we do things, what opportunities exist for that. And then I want to spend a lot of time talking about some of the changes and opportunities that exist in marketing and how things are evolving and how quickly things are changing. And specifically what I'll do is I will use Minnesota Grown as sort of a case study for real-world data. So I'll use how we use some of these tools as an example. Greg talked about how you can ask questions, so please do that at any time. I'll also stop at a couple of points and specifically ask for them, but by all means, jump in and ask questions whenever you have them. So good, thank you for answering the second poll question. That's really good. So that's very helpful, and that will help kind of craft how I spend my time. The first thing I want to start with is the point that, at least in Minnesota, local foods is not a new phenomenon in terms of being supportive of local foods and valuing local farmers. And that's one thing, it's not that way all over the country. So we're very fortunate to have that. And as you can see, we've been doing the Minnesota Grown program since the early to mid 1980s, which is pretty unusual. I meet with colleagues who do programs like mine in other states from all over the country, and this sort of steady support is unheard of. In most states, their programs come and go, and they kind of go through this feast and famine cycle. So we're extremely fortunate to have that kind of ongoing support in Minnesota. As I mentioned, it's existed for over 25 years. When I started here, we had between 250 and 300 members, and now we're pushing 1,300. So we've seen growth. Something else that's unique about Minnesota Grown is that it's a lot of different products. In some states, it's limited to edible things. In this case, what we do is not just edible. We work with Christmas trees. We work with garden centers, nurseries, people who are more what you would call agritainment. And so we're very diverse that way, and we think that that's an important thing because our emphasis is about buying local and local economic activity. We are a membership-based organization, and basically when a farm or a farmer's market joins us, what they're doing is they're purchasing a license to use the Minnesota Grown logo. That's just $20 a year. And what it gives you is the right to use the logo. It also gives you unlimited access to marketing materials, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But that license fee of $20 hasn't changed in over 8 years. So it's a program that really delivers value. In the last year alone, we've sent out over 1 million free stickers, price cards, rubber bands, twist ties, all sorts of marketing materials to our members. All of those things are free. All of those are free in any quantity that people like. And part of that is because it's about being professional and having a professional image for your product, whether you're at a farmer's market or in a grocery store or have an on-farm retail stand. It breaks my heart to go to a farmer's market and see vendors that are, literally writing their price and product information on the back of grocery bags and those kinds of things. You wouldn't put a Ferrari engine into the body of a Pinto. And with local foods, we are selling something that is so much better, so much fresher, so much flavorful. But we need to convey that to the consumers at point of sale as well. And I think that's one of the key things that the Minnesota Grown program does is offer people a way to have a very professional image to their product. Something that's really, really important to Minnesota Grown. I think it's important to our program, but I think it's important to everybody that's a marketer and every business that exists. And that is to keep things simple, or at least as simple as possible. With Minnesota Grown and the Minnesota Grown logo, we have one message. That's local. That's what the logo means. That's what the legal backbone behind the logo is. which makes it very easy to understand, both for consumers, for people who use it. And there's room underneath that banner of Minnesota grown and local for people of varying sizes and production practices. And we encourage people to market those attributes of their business and products as well. But what's allowed this program to stand the test of time is that our message is very, very simple. There's tons of third-party certifications out there. But if people don't understand what they mean, the value in those programs is really not as great as it could be. So I just wanted to share a couple of quick little images to kind of share, kind of highlight that point of simplicity. And again, I think that that's something for all of us to keep in mind if we're developing a promotion, if we're developing, labels and images for our farm. The cleaner and the simpler we can keep things, I think, the better off that we will all be. So in addition to the logo and the promotional materials, the other thing that Minnesota Grown is really commonly known for is the Minnesota Grown Directory. We've been publishing that for more than 30 years. Farms who sell direct to the consumer are eligible to be in it. So it's all of the things I talked about earlier: choose and cut Christmas tree farms, farm wineries, pick your own farms, you name it. If it's a farmer, meat and livestock, that's an important thing to consider as well. People tend to think of buying local and they kind of focus just on produce, but it's much more than that. And so this directory encompasses all of the ways that a farmer can sell direct to the consumer. We last year broke 1,000 listings for the first time, and we distribute 155,000 printed copies statewide on an annual basis. So it's a book that is available, it's popular, it's got a long history. The cost of being in that book is just $40 for a listing. So if you add it up, the most you can ever pay to participate in the Minnesota Grown program is $60. $20 makes you a member, gets you the right to use the logo, gets you the free promotional materials, and then $40 puts you in the directory, both the printed book and online. So grand total of $60. I mentioned that our license fee of $20 hasn't changed in 8 years. We haven't raised our listing fee for the directory in 13 years. So imagine what it would be like to go buy a car for what it would have cost new 13 years ago. What you see there is the cover of the current year's directory. We're in the middle of putting together the 2016-2017 book. Whether you were in last year and haven't yet renewed, or whether this is something new to you and you'd like to jump on board, you can still do that, but we are literally kind of in the last handful of days where we can still add listings to that. So if you're not in it and you're interested in joining, give me a phone call, shoot me an email, and we can still make sure that you're there. I can offer you guys a first-time sneak peek at the cover of this coming year's directory. A lot different than last year's. We're really excited about it. We think it's kind of bright and cheerful and conveys a lot of the different things in the book. So what I've tried to do so far is really quickly throw a lot at you in terms of what the background of the Minnesota Grown program is. And in a minute, I'll shift into the kind of general marketing things and trends and things that we've observed here and how they apply to farms. But before I kind of shift gears, I'd just like to see if anybody has any questions at all at this point before we kind of turn the page and move into the next chapter.
And I should say, if you do have questions, be sure to raise your hand or write them in that chat thing. Some of you have came in a little bit later, but on the bottom left here, underneath the video of Paul, there's a picture of a hand next to a picture of a check mark and a cross. Just hit that hand button and you raise your hand and we'll unmute you.
All right. And I don't see any, and we'll have time, we'll take some time at the end of this as well to make sure people have a chance to ask questions. So as Greg said, if you have questions, just click the hand button and we'll make sure that we address those. When I go out and I talk about local foods and I talk about changes, one of the things people are most interested in is what are we seeing in terms of growth areas? Where is the growth in local foods most visible? Because people read about it in the paper, you know, it's a pretty common topic, but because we have existed as a program for so long, it makes it pretty easy for us to document change and to be able to quantitatively show people where growth has occurred. And the first thing I'd like to start out with is talk about farmers markets. So just going back over the last 20 years or so, it's pretty easy to see the growth in the number of farmers markets across the state. We were in the low 40s for, basically all of the 90s and the first couple of years after the turn of the century. And about 2003 or 4, the number of farmers markets absolutely skyrocketed. Last year's book, we had 185 farmers markets around the state. And just the years of growth year after year has really continued for about the last decade or so. We are seeing that plateau and flatten out, and I think part of what we've had, and if you talk to a lot of growers, especially in the metro area, they'll tell you that we may have seen a little bit too fast of growth in the number of farmers markets, and that's caused some challenges for farmers. And so I think we're at a point where we kind of need to get back to equilibrium, so to speak, in terms of the number of markets that we have, especially in the metro area. But certainly this is a very good sign in terms of people wanting local foods, people demanding to be able to buy from a local farmer. Another area where we've seen real rapid growth, and the University of Minnesota is front and center at getting credit for this, and that is the number of farm wineries. The university has developed so many varieties of grapes that make excellent wine and that are able to survive Minnesota winters. And so, when I started here, there were 2, maybe 3 farm wineries. And now, we're sitting at over 40 in our directory. And if you look at the number of licensed farm wineries that already have their license but may not be open to the public yet, we're going to be in that 50 to 60 farm winery range easily within the next year or 2. So again, tremendous growth. And in this case, it's a symptom of, one, the development of new varieties that work here, but also people's demand for fun activities that center around local food, local beverages, and certainly wineries fit the bill in terms of delivering an experience as well as the product. And then the other place that really, whenever I talk to reporters, this is the one that completely blows them away, and that's the number of CSA farms or community-supported agriculture farms. We didn't even have a category in our directory for CSA farms until the early 1990s. And, we hovered in that small handful of people until we got to about 2003, 2004, and then it just absolutely shot straight up. We peaked at 95 CSAs, Minnesota CSAs in our directory last year. And a little bit like farmers markets, we're seeing a little bit of a leveling off, and we're seeing some people kind of come and go and kind of adjust to that rapid growth that we've seen. But one of the things that's been interesting for me to watch from my vantage point is that originally those CSA farms were pretty much just CSA farms, and that's what they did. And over the last 5 to 7 years, I've observed a lot of farms who are 4th, 5th generation fruit and vegetable farms who've always sold into grocery stores. They've sold at farmers markets. They've sold in a variety of ways. And they've seen the CSA model be successful, and they've adapted their farm to include CSA as a vehicle for them to sell their products as well. And so, really, as you look at those places where it's easy to measure and quantify growth, those are 3 of the categories that absolutely completely jump right off the page at you. So the next thing that I want to shift to is kind of marketing tools. So I've talked a little bit about the Minnesota Grown program. I've talked about some of the changes in terms of how people are selling and what sorts of farms and marketing activities have increased. But I want to talk about some of the specific marketing tools that exist for farms and businesses. Before I do that, just a quick pause to scan here and see if anybody has any questions. So if you've got something you'd like to ask about anything we've covered so far, fire away. All right, it's a quiet group tonight. So what I want to talk about is just how much things have changed. And it's a mixed blessing if you're a small farmer, because the tools that I'm about to talk about have leveled the playing field. But they've also created a whole nother set of activities for people to manage. The first thing I want to say is, you know, I don't think I'm that old. I'm less than 50 years old. I've been here close to 30 years. But if you look at that slide and all the things on it, not a single thing there existed when I was hired to work with the Minnesota Grown Program. And all the things that we take for granted. But think back to not that long ago when every house, every office, every desk had a phone book, had a yellow pages, and that's what people used to find information. And now I don't think I could find a phone book anywhere in this entire building if you paid me to do that. So part of what I do when I go out and I talk to, for example, marketing classes, and I talk to these students who've always known all these things. I mean, they never grew up in a time without websites and smartphones and video games. Is to tell them that their world will probably change just as fast, if not faster than mine has. And that they need to be prepared for change, and they need to develop the skill of identifying what changes are real and important and which ones are kind of fads that will go away. You know, when Facebook came out, there were a lot of people who said, well, that's never going to last, that's going to go away. Well, it's turned out to be something that's certainly passing the test of time. For us as a program and for most farms, kind of the one thing on that list that's the centerpiece of what they've adopted and what they use in as the core of their marketing efforts is websites. And for us, again, looking at just the last 10, 11 years to look at how many of our customers we're serving through our website instead of what we used to do with telephones and printed pieces and those kinds of activities. You know, we started tracking our unique visitor count shortly after the turn of the century, and we were in that 10 to 15,000 people a year range. This year we went over 308,000 unique visitors. And keep in mind that's a unique visitor, so it's not a page view or a hit. So if you went to my website today, you would count as one, and if you went 20 times tomorrow and every day for the rest of the month, it would still just read one on the unique visitor count. Another way to look at it is we're printing 155,000 copies of the directory and distributing those statewide, but we're serving almost twice that number of people through our website. Another way to look at it, if you just look at the last couple of years and you see the growth over the last 5 years, and you see how much traffic continues to grow to our website as people are looking for more and more local foods. So a question for all of you to think about, for those of you who are in business or those of you who are working with farmers and helping them market, website's very much important. But one of the questions you have to ask about your website is whether or not it's responsive. So here's what I mean by that. A responsive website is one that can identify how you are accessing their website. In other words, it can identify whether you are using a mobile phone, a tablet, or a regular size desktop computer. And what it will show you and how it layers the data will change depending on the device that you're using. So in other words, the same web address will show you visually a different stack of data and a different format of data on your smartphone than what it will show you on a tablet, and that's different than what your desktop will look like. And it's really important because simply, the logistics of screen size, if you try to take a full what's on your desktop computer screen and stuff that onto somebody's phone, they're going to have a really, really frustrating experience. And they're not going to be able to access your information very well, and they're probably going to leave your site right away. And through the magic of Google Analytics, which is another important tool for managing your website and to see where people are coming from and how they're using your site. But through Google Analytics, we're able to look at how people access our website. And to me, it's pretty shocking to know that more than half of the people who come to MinnesotaGrown.com, so these are your customers, more than half of the people who come to that website are using either a mobile phone or a tablet. And in just 5 years, that went from about maybe 5% of the people to well over half, and it continues to go up every year. And I suspect for the next couple of years, we'll still see more growth yet on top of that. But what it means for you if you've got a website is that you need to see what does your page look like on a smartphone? What does your page look like on a tablet? And you either need to have your web provider shift you over to a responsive design, and there's, no matter what platform you're on, there's tons of templates that are responsive, or you need to just lay out your website in a way that it will still function correctly and look good on a smartphone.
Hey, Paul, can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
We've got a question here from Karen. Okay. That's a really impressive chart. Can you tell further metrics, like how many people were from Minnesota or who visited the state or who was from other areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Google Analytics is one of my favorite programs in the world because it can tell you all of that information. It can tell you where they're at. It can tell you where they came from. So I'll show you in a little bit. I can track how many people came to our website from Facebook, or if the Fergus Falls paper publishes a story and they talk about my website and they put a link in their online article, I can see how many people came there from that. I can also use it to track, like if I was going to buy banner ads on a newspaper website or Star Tribune, something like that, I can see exactly how many people came from that site. I can even set up goals, and I can track whether or not those people got to detailed listing pages of members. So yeah, as a marketer, data is so powerful in terms of being able to evaluate the success of your marketing efforts and how your customers behave. So yeah, so we try to look at as much of that as possible and to factor that in. It's a great question. Any other questions kind of following up on web traffic and how that's changing? All right, so the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the power of social media. And, Facebook is the 2,000-pound gorilla that everybody loves to hate, but at the end of the day, just about everybody uses it. Basically, all this numbers just says, as much as people like to not like Facebook, they use it, and they spend a lot of time on it, and they spend a lot of time every day on it. They use their mobile phone to access it. They use their desktop. People are doing it at work. People are doing it at home. It's a big deal. So like most people in the world, the Minnesota Grown program started a Facebook page several years ago, and we've now got over 25,000 people that follow us, and we add something like 19 or 20 new people every day who like us and who follow our page. And it gives us a lot of power to reach people in different ways. The nice thing is once they like us, it gives us the ability to kind of reach out and proactively send them a message. So, when it's apple season, we can reach them at the right time prior to a weekend with a message. And that's a really powerful tool because even if they bookmark your website, they're still only going to go there when they want to. But with Facebook, we can get in front of them when we want to with our message. The question earlier was about, can we track where people come from, and we do. And so with Facebook, our goal is to really make Facebook integrate with our website. And it's really important that all of your marketing tools coordinate, that they're consistent in their message, that they work well together. And for us, you know, this past year we had over 15,000 people that came to our website directly from Facebook. That's up from just over 10,000 people just 1 year before. So we've integrated a Facebook feed onto our homepage of our website so that we can, if somebody comes to our website first, we can invite them to go to our Facebook page. If they find us on Facebook, we can invite them to visit our web page. And so we want to drive traffic back and forth. It's really important that those things are able to coordinate with each other and work together. You know, just like Google Analytics gives you all sorts of information about people, our Facebook page is able to track a lot of demographic information. In our case, our followers, the people who like us, are overwhelmingly female, 80% female. Facebook itself is pretty much 50-50 male and female. So not surprisingly, we skew pretty heavily female. That's our target demographic. When we advertise, we're looking for places that can reach females with children at home between the ages of 25 and 54. And if you look at our Facebook page, that's exactly the kind of people who've decided to like us and to follow us. And for most of you who are selling directly to consumers, I would venture to bet that your key demographic is probably female, probably somebody in that 25 to 54-year-old market. We know that farmers market consumers in most cases tend to skew a little bit older than that, but we're really focused on trying to hit those people who have kids at home, to get to families who are looking for things to do, who are looking to feed their kids healthy foods, who are looking for fun activities to do as a family. So, you know, the data shows that tons and tons of people use Facebook. We know that Minnesota Grown can use Facebook effectively, but one of the questions that I get from, you know, orchards and berry farms is, yeah, but do my customers use Facebook? Are the people that I see on my farm using Facebook?
Yeah. Sorry to jump in, Paul. We're starting to get a couple of questions here about that. So what is the amount of increased sales farmers have through Minnesota Grown, if you know that?
Ooh, I'll touch on that in a minute. Yep.
And then that's fascinating. Thoughts on why from Karen? If you can say why to what exactly? I don't think I was watching when this came in. Oh, why women?
Oh, sure.
And then thanks. I think you answered my question with the follow-up. Well, there you go.
Okay. So let me do the why women part of it. And in terms of, I'll give you an anecdote that kind of speaks to that. So, and as a husband, I think I can get away with saying this and be truthful about it, and nobody's going to challenge this. So we did surveys of people at the Minnesota State Fair several years ago, and it was in the area where all the Christmas trees are. And I was partnering with the Christmas Tree Association, and we wanted to find out what kinds of trees people like. Do they like, you know, fat ones, skinny ones, you know, what kind of needles they liked. And so as people came by to look at the trees, we would ask them all sorts of questions. And these were kind of personal, you know, in-person, look people right in the eye kind of questions. And, you know, I'd get families that would come by. So you've got, you know, mom, dad, and a couple kids. And one of the questions I would ask them is, so when you go get a tree, who makes the decision as to which tree? And they would all kind of look at each other, and they would all say, well, you know, we all get to help, and it's kind of, you know, everybody chimes in. But when you asked, you said, yeah, but at the end of the day, if you're not all in agreement on the same tree, who actually gets to make the decision? And every one of those people would look at mom, and without exception, the mom makes the decisions on most of those things. And I really think that in most of the local food cases, as much as, you know, we've got equality of everything and everybody shares in decisions and all that, where are we going to go this weekend and what activities are we going to do as a family, I think is still largely driven by the female in the household. In most cases, they're still kind of making the key decisions. What am I going to feed the kids? What are we going to do for fun activities? Those sorts of things. So, you know, I don't want to come off as sexist, but in most cases, the decisions that I, as a Minnesota Grown program, care about are still largely driven by the female in the house. And we very much want to reach people who have kids at home. And while there's more cases where, you know, if it's a single family house, maybe dad's got the kids, in more cases than not, it's still, if there's a single family house, it tends to be the female that has the kids at home. And so much of what we do is activity and experience based. It's about getting out to the orchard. It's about going out to get a Christmas tree or going out to pick berries. And so, did that answer the question about kind of why females?
Looks like it.
All right. The other thing that I'll say is, so those Facebook numbers where it was, you know, 80% of the people who like our page are female, you can also see who interacts with your page. So in other words, who likes, who shares, who comments. If you look at who interacts with the page, that number goes from 80% to well over 90% of the people that are engaged with us are females. So it's pretty amazing to see what that data leads, what kind of conclusions it brings to us.
All right.
Go ahead, Greg.
Are you going to, there's the outstanding question also, what the amount of increased sales? I don't know if you're going to get to that later in your presentation or not.
Thank you for reminding me, because I'd already forgotten about that, so thanks. So we get at that a couple different ways. We have done surveys of our members, and we ask them, in their perspective, what percentage of their sales do they believe comes from our directory? And it's really kind of all over the board, but on average, people tend to put it in that 3 to 5% of their sales range that come from the directory. But it depends. We've got other people who come to us and they say, it's kind of funny for them because people will say, well, I found you through your website. And they don't have a website. We are their website because they're listing on our website and our directory. And so there's people who will come up to me at conferences and say, the only marketing I do is to be in your directory in print and online, and it works. So part of what we do is we'll survey our members on occasion and kind of get their perspective on it. The other thing that we do, and that fits right into this next piece of the presentation, is we did a whole series of customer surveys about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 depending on the segment. And we surveyed actual customers who were buying something from one of these types of farms. And so we invited them to go online or to fill out a paper copy, but to share their experience at the farm or the farmer's market that day. And we gathered all kinds of information from them. We gathered demographic information, how far they traveled, what their average purchase amount was, how they learned about the farm. And so with that question, we actually could get at the percentages of people who were using the Minnesota Grown Directory to find the farm. And it varies from segment to segment, but in the case of like berry farms, it was something like 20% of the customers at the berry farm talked about using the Minnesota Grown Directory as one of the ways to find the farm and to hear about the farm. Typically with the, Christmas tree farms, apple orchards, those kinds of things, it's more like 10% of the people say that. So anyway, so we do surveys both of the members to try and get their perspective, but really that direct customer survey is really where we get a lot of the data, and that's something that I'll talk about next.
All right, another question just came in here too. To be online and not in the directory, is that a different price?
Nope, it's all the same. So $40 puts you in both. If you are kind of late to the party and it's not until after we print this year's directory, you can still jump in online. We charge you the same amount. It's still $40. So jump in the next couple of days and you get both. You get the printed listing and the online listing, and it's the same price. So those surveys that we did, first of all, one thing I'll mention is I'm pretty sure this is the largest survey of customers, actual customers who were buying direct from the farmer that I know of anywhere in the country. We had more than 5,000 completed surveys among the different categories that we did. So we have a ton of data that came out of those surveys. And I was just, tonight, the only piece of it I'll share with you is kind of related to Facebook, but there's a wealth of information that we've got. As I mentioned, average purchase price, how far people travel, did they go to the farm with kids, all those kinds of things. But some of the interesting results are that 84% of new apple orchard customers are on Facebook every day. And that's of new customers. And so one of the take-home messages is that to reach new customers, social media is a really powerful way to do that. And if you're talking about people under the age of 40, it becomes even more valuable as a tool to reach new customers. So that's what came out of the apple orchard survey. Berry farms tend to be a little bit older consumers that pick your own berry farms, but yet we still had well over half of the new customers saying that Facebook was something that they use at least every day. Farmers markets, again, still older, but still, even at farmers markets, and even at farmers markets 3 years ago, over half of the people use Facebook daily. But here's where kind of the rubber hits the road. So they say they use Facebook, but what does that have to do with whether they're coming to your farm or market? 10% of those customers who completed the survey said that social media influenced their decision to shop at the market that specific day. Now, that doesn't mean that the farmer's market had a Facebook page. It may mean that their cousin Shirley put a post on the day before that said, went to the farmer's market, look at all this cool produce I got, had a blast. And then this customer said, well, cousin Shirley said that was a great trip. I'm going to go to the market. What it speaks to is the ability of social media to influence action and to encourage people to do something or to not do something. You know, what I say is that word of mouth is always king in the marketplace. That's always the most powerful marketing tool. That hasn't changed and it will never change. But the form that word of mouth advertising takes does change. Word of mouth advertising used to mean you would call up cousin Shirley and you would have a phone conversation and say, hey, I went to the market yesterday, it was fantastic. Now word of mouth advertising is just as likely to be putting a Facebook post with a picture saying, hey, we had a great time at the apple orchard yesterday. Here's a picture of the kids, picking apples or eating apples, or here's the apple pie I baked with the apples from, Smith Orchards down the road. So it really does have the power to influence.
Hey, and we have another question here too, I think that refers to the previous survey over there. Do you have the breakdown of that survey available for members?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably the best thing for people to do is just shoot me an email or give me a phone call. I think the last slide that I've got has my phone number on it. Just give me a shout and I will send you that data. But the better news is that, so the data I'm talking about tonight is about 3 years old. We just finalized a grant project with a specialty crop block grant program, which means we will be able to update that data. So starting this summer with Pick Your Own Berry Farms, we are going to be able to repeat all of those surveys and generate a whole new treasure trove of consumer data and be able to compare that to what we learned 3 or 4 years ago. So we're really, really excited about that. A Minnesota Grown member, let's say that you're an apple orchard and you'd like to be a part of our customer survey and you'd like to know what your customers think. It doesn't cost you anything. So it will be free. And what we will do is provide you with the survey instrument, which is basically a stack of about 1,000 postcards. You literally just hand that to everybody that comes through and purchases something, and you say, hey, take a minute and tell us what you think of your experience today. We really value your opinion, and that's it. We do everything else. And at the end of it, you will get a confidential summary of your customers, so you'll know if they came to your farm, you will see all of their data and all their comments about what they liked and didn't like. And then everybody will get to see the aggregated statewide data, but only you will see the responses sorted by your farm. The only cost to you is we ask that you come up with a $25 gift card so that on the postcard we can say, hey, take a minute, complete this, tell us what you think, and one of our customers will win a $25 gift card to come back to the orchard next fall. And that's it. And then so, you know, if you're one of these categories of people, this is an amazing way to get free customer research, be able to compare it to your colleagues around the state. It's a pretty powerful tool. If you're a Minnesota Grow member, you'll be reading about this in our update newsletter that'll come out actually later this week. We'll kind of tease that because this is a brand new announcement and a brand new opportunity that we've got. But if you'd like to see the current data from, like I say, 3 or 4 years ago, I will absolutely be happy to share that with you and discuss that with you as well. So really short and sweet. So let's say that you have a Facebook page. In addition to making posts, you can do Facebook advertising, so you can pay to put an ad on Facebook. What we do and what we've done with great success is not so much Facebook advertising, but to boost a post is what it's called, basically to pay money to have a Facebook post seen by people. And you get to choose, you know, do you want it to be seen by people in Minnesota? Do you want it to reach males, females, what age? Do you want it to go to people who like your page? Do you want it to go to people who are friends of people who like your page? So, you know, for me, if I was a local farmer's market, I would put a post that talks about the opening of the market or what's in season, and I would boost it, and I would have it go to people who like my page and their friends. And that is that's kind of the definition of a warm market. And I think you're likely to get a really positive reception. So just a super quick example of how that worked for us. Here's a post that we did in October promoting how much fun you can have at pumpkin patches and orchards. We've got a fun picture of Carrie Tollefson and her daughter Ruby in the pumpkin patch. And in our case, we said, we'll spend $100. We want to have this post seen by females in Minnesota between our, you know, target ages 25 and 60. And the nice thing, just like Google Analytics or anything else, you can access a lot of data and a lot of results. So down on the bottom where it says Boost Complete, if you click that button after you've run your promotion, you'll get the results. So in this case, that $100 meant that over 24,000 people saw that post. It meant that 316 people clicked on it and came to minnesotagrown.com so they could find a pumpkin patch or an orchard. So about 32 cents a click. And we had 152 of those people who liked our page, which means now those people who saw this post show up on their feed actually looked at it and said, hey, that looks cool, and then they liked our page so that they'll see future data from us and future information. But it's really easy to do. I think it's really cost effective. In this case, we spent $100, but you don't need to do that. You could spend $10 to promote your local farmer's market or your local roadside stand, whatever it is that you have. It's a great way to build awareness and to promote your business to folks. So one of the last things I want to mention in terms of resources is that we, you know, I talked about how everybody used to have a phone book on their desk and yellow pages, and obviously nobody uses those anymore because everybody goes to the search engines. People, or things like Google, Yahoo, and Bing. That's the new place people go, or people now will just simply ask their telephone information and get it that way. So the challenge is, if somebody is looking for a farm in their area, how do you make sure that you show up in the results that they're going to see on Google? So you can do a lot of programming to your website to try to show up highly in the search engines, but you can also pay to show up highly in those rankings, and only pay when somebody actually clicks on your listing to go to your website. So we use this heavily with Minnesota Grown. This is a screenshot of what would happen, not today, but if you did this in November or December and you searched for where to buy a Christmas tree in Minnesota. And when you search, you'll see all these ads from Home Depot and Target, because with Christmas trees, everybody wants to sell you an artificial tree. And so the only way we can compete with that is to pay to show up high. So if you look at right underneath all those images of mainly fake Christmas trees, there's an ad from us that says Real Minnesota Christmas Trees at minnesotagrown.com. And when people click on that, they go to our online directory and they can see all the choose and cut Christmas tree farms that we have in Minnesota. I only pay to be here if somebody clicks on that ad. And that ad only shows up if somebody searched for my keywords. So if somebody searched for apples, my ad's not going to come up. Actually, my Apple ad would come up. But if somebody was looking for a new car, they're not going to see this. It's only when they search for keywords that I chose. But for us, it's been a very effective, cost-effective way to market. Any questions about that? One of the things, just like a boosted post for Facebook, pay-per-click advertising is a really powerful tool that you can use on a local level. It's even easier to use this locally than it is to use boosted posts for Facebook. Because let's say that you're in the St. Cloud Farmers Market and you wanted to make sure that people looking for local foods would see the St. Cloud Farmers Market website show up in their search results. You can go into Google when you create your pay-per-click account, and you can actually draw a circle with whatever radius you want around St. Cloud. So you could draw a 30-mile radius, and only people within that radius would ever see your ad. So you don't have to worry about paying for somebody in California or Hawaii who saw your ad and clicked on it and then cost you money. So you can target where that ad shows up. You can set a budget as little as $5, so it's easy to experiment and play with. If any of you are ever going to try that and just kind of want to poke around a little bit, feel free to give me a call. Just ask me questions. I can help answer them. We've been doing this with a ton of success here since 2007, 2008, something like that. So we've been using this, basically every product that we have in the directory, we have a pay-per-click campaign for. Last couple things that I want to mention is electronic newsletters, great way to keep in touch with folks. A lot of people create mailing lists of their customers. They'll send out postcards. They'll send out paper newsletters. And an e-newsletter is a real cost-effective way to do that, and it has the benefit of allowing you to change your message right up to the moment you hit send. So, it's one of the challenges of the local food business is a rainstorm overnight or in the summer, a couple of 90-degree days can dramatically change what you have available and how long it'll be available. So by having the ability to communicate electronically with your customers, that's a pretty powerful tool. And so this is something we've built up. I talked about how so many people use mobile phones to access the internet and to check email on the website. On the left is what our Pick of the Month newsletter used to look like up until, I don't know, almost a year ago.
We got a quick question in here. Sure. How much does it cost for each click on Google?
It depends on the product. So for things like apples, cheap. For my cost on my Apple campaign, it's maybe 20 cents a click. Now to me, that's pretty cheap, because the question you have to ask is, what is it worth to me to get somebody onto my website knowing that they are searching for information about a product that I grow and sell? To me, if I could do that for 20 cents, I would do that all day, because you should be making more than that per customer. And not all those people are going to come to your farm, but that's pretty cost-effective advertising, especially when you compare to what it costs to do, radio ads or newspaper ads or God forbid, a TV ad or something like that. Because we've done all those things. At least this is measurable and targeted. So apples, very inexpensive. Some of my keywords with apples I'm paying 7, 8 cents a piece for. products like Christmas trees are much more expensive. And you saw why, because I have to compete with Target and Home Depot and, you know, companies in China who would love to ship a Christmas tree to you. The nice thing about apples and strawberries is I don't have to compete with those kind of people. So those are much more cost effective. But a very good question. So was there another one, Greg?
Nope, not that I see.
Okay. What we did with our pick of the month is change the format of it so that it would look better on a mobile phone. So on the right, you see our new format where that fits perfectly in the width of a phone. It's easy for people to read the articles. They can use their fingers, simply scroll down, push whatever article they want to read more about. I was shocked when we made this change. We got a bunch of emails from people who subscribe to our newsletter just raving about how much cleaner it looked and how much easier it was to access the information. So instead of giving them all the text in the newsletter, we just gave them headlines and allowed them to click on them to find more information. It was really important to do that, and it goes back into how your website is laid out. You also have to look at how your newsletters are laid out to see if those work on that format as well. I'll skip this part because in the poll, people didn't talk about selling to grocery stores, but all those promotional materials that are free to members are also free to grocery stores. So you'll see grocers all over the state using these big 16 by 20 inch posters that say Minnesota grown. They're free. The other one you see here is about 8.5 by 11. That's laminated. That's free. We do a contest for retailers. The Retailer of the Year, Lunds & Byerly's, has won that for big chains a few times. They use the heck out of that logo. It's all over their stores in season. But stores all over the state realize the value of marketing local foods, and they use that logo to promote that. If you were selling to restaurants, grocery stores, if you're a member, you don't have to pay anything extra. We have a wholesale directory on our website. It allows you to say whether you're GAP certified, do you have liability insurance, all those kinds of things, so that a chef or a food service director can find people in their area with the products that they want to buy from. Last quick things, leave you with opportunity to get some financial help. So if you are doing value-added processing, which includes things like grading, packing, sorting of produce, we have a grant program that can help you buy equipment. So if you've got any kind of grading equipment, if you put anything into bags or boxes and you need equipment for that, this program can cover 25% of the cost of equipment. We do 2 rounds a year. The next one is coming up in just under a month, March 8th. There'll be another one 6 months after that, but it's a great way to help buy equipment. Very few grants in the world can help you buy tangible equipment. This one can. If you're GAP certified, we'll reimburse 75% of the cost of your audit, your GAP audit, whether it's done by a third-party audit firm or USDA or the State Department of Ag. We'll cover 75% of that for you. And then if you've got a local school that wants to buy local foods, but they need a bigger walk-in cooler or they need to buy a food processor, we've got a grant program that can help them buy equipment as well.
Quick question in here, Paul. Do your grants cover dehydrators? Everything gets dehydrated. Yeah, that would actually, that's absolutely value adding. So if you're making, dehydrated, whatever it is, carrots, vegetables, you name it, yeah, that would certainly be something you could apply for. It's got to be something that's commercial that you're, and what you'll say in the application is, how is this going to help you grow your business? How's it going to help you sell more products and be more profitable? That's what it's all about. So that was my quick sprint to the finish to get everything out there. And then, so this is how the best way to reach me is just call me. That's my direct number. If you want to email me, you can go to minnesotagrown.com. You can find me in the About Us page. My last plug for the directory is that you can still get in both the printed and online editions of the directory for this coming year.
but you have to do it really quickly. But just call me, say yes, and then we'll get you in and make sure we'll clean up the paperwork after that. So I just want to say thank you very much for allowing me to be here, and leave an invitation for folks to ask any questions that they want about any of the things we've talked about.
And you know what, I'm going to go through and unmute everybody, so now's your chance to make your voices heard. And maybe you can mute yourself if you're playing music really loud or something. No one's doing that yet. All right, any questions out there? Time to spill them out. Oh, people are muting themselves.
They're all watching the returns from the Hampshire, you know, rooting for their favorite candidate.
Yep.
Actually, what's happening in my house is that Jonathan's watching the returns from New Hampshire, so you're right.
Now, I see a hand by Chris Colson. Do you have a question?
Well, so you can either blurt it out or feel free to chat it in. I will say there are a few more chat questions here. What requirements does a grocery store need to meet in order to use the Minnesota grown promotional material? Do they need to purchase only from producers that are also registered with Minnesota grown?
That's a super question. So that's one of the advantages of Minnesota grown is that's a trademarked logo. It has legal weight. So whether it's a farm or a grocery store, they can only use the logo to promote things that were actually grown or raised here in Minnesota. A grocery store doesn't need to purchase a license to become a member, so they get to use the logo without a license, but they're still bound by the requirement that they can only put a Minnesota grown logo on the apples that come from Minnesota. They can't use it for the Washington apples, anything like that. So and actually what's in statute is 80% of the product with the logo has to be from Minnesota. When they created this 30 years ago, they wanted to make sure that potato growers on the North Dakota border or apple growers in southeast Minnesota wouldn't be hung up if a couple of apples from Wisconsin or North Dakota got into the mix. And so, but there is a legal definition, and it is something that if I get a call, for example, and consumers are very particular, I'll get calls from people that'll say, I was in such and such a grocery store, and they had your sign up, and I know those apples were from Washington. You know, we'll follow up, we'll call the store, we'll talk it over and see, it's important to have a logo with some legal meaning behind it and with some enforcement capability behind it.
All right. Does a business need to be registered anywhere to be allowed to use this directory?
To use the directory? The directory
the Minnesota grown.
Anybody. Oh, the wholesale directory maybe? So if the wholesale directory is available to anybody who wants to use it. So anybody who comes to our website can use that directory to look up a farm who sells to restaurants, grocers, schools, whatever. It's all of our directories are completely free and open to the public to use.
All right. Do you see any emerging new products or any emerging products? Maybe not new.
Well, I mean, certainly the buzzword that everybody talks about all over the country is craft beer. Man, it's everywhere. We've done value-added grants with several craft brewers. I know there are people who are growing hops and working to be able to do that better and more efficiently and more successfully in Minnesota. I mean, that's probably the one that comes to mind. The other thing, of course, is all the efforts being done on season extension. And, the University of Minnesota Extension has phenomenal resources, and we're seeing folks do things and extending the growing season in a way that really is a game changer for a whole variety of products. If it wasn't for the spotted wing Drosophila and its impact on soft fruit, I think that we would have seen a huge burst in day-neutral strawberries. But unfortunately, that pest has just really wreaked havoc with strawberries in Minnesota.
Yeah, all right. Another question from Chris, who tried to blurt it out, but we didn't hear. To apply for the grant for the dehydrator, does it have to be a commercial kitchen, or will it fall under the cottage food bill?
That's a good question. What I would say, Chris, is shoot me an email or give me a call, and what I'll do is I'll put you in touch with the person who administers that grant. I think it would be okay. I don't think it would have to be a fully licensed commercial kitchen if you fall under the cottage food bill. But rather than me shoot my mouth off, let me put you in touch with the people that are actually going to be evaluating and processing that application.
All right. Would Minnesota Grown ever branch out to have additional labels for products that are either non-GMO or organic?
Actually, no, that's a great question. We actually have a Minnesota Grown organic logo. So it looks very similar to well, it's the same body of that Minnesota Grown logo, but it's modified with a tagline that says organic. And to use it, you have to be certified organic. So you can't be self-certified, even though that's legal, but you have to be certified. You have to send us your certification. And then we actually have point of sale materials just with that logo. So we've got stickers with that logo on it. And so that's one example of how we do have custom versions of the logo. The other thing that we've done in partnership with the U of M Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships is developed regional versions of the logo. The best example, or the first example, is Northwest Minnesota, where we've got a Rivers and Prairies logo that's unique to Northwest Minnesota, but it still has that strong Minnesota Grown presence. And we even do custom editions of the directory for that region so that they can use our cover pages to promote what they're doing in the region and the area's farmers markets. The guts of the directory are the same, so all 1,000 plus listings are in it, but they get to customize the cover and talk about all the great things that either SHIP is doing in the area or that the partnership is doing. So we do custom versions of the logo. I don't see a non-GMO logo in our future. The nice thing about the organic one is that has uniform national standards. It's got a very easy way to prove that somebody has that. But the short answer to your question is yes, we've got custom versions of it, and we're open to ideas all the time. It's a good question.
All right, any last questions? Throw them in the chat. I've muted everybody. My grand idea of unmuting 30-some people, 20-some, it didn't turn out to be a good one. But yeah, throw some questions in the chat box if you have the chance. And otherwise, would like to thank you, Paul, for a great session here.
Oh, thank you.
And so everybody knows, if you'd like, you can view this online. I don't know that it's up immediately, but you can come back and check out the session as we go into the future. So if you forget anything or wanted some more information back, come up here in a week or so, and you can view this and all other local food college sessions that have ever happened. You can view them online. All right. Well, thanks all. We'll be signing off.
Thank you.